Vanilla is a household staple, so much so that this fragrant bean ends up in a mix with other ingredients to make the sweet delights we've all come to love. But have you ever wondered how this expensive bean comes to be? Well, the wait is over because we here at Whole Process are about to unveil its spicy secrets. This is the story of frozen vanilla, the rarest, most aromatic version of the spice that we know and love. Vanilla's journey began in the 15th century when the Spanish encountered it in the Americas and carried it back to their homeland in Europe. At first, it was a luxury reserved for the elite, often stirred into dark chocolate to create a delectable and foreign drink. The people, however, seemed to believe it had all kinds of powers, some real, some imagined, relaxing the body, healing ailments, even sparking romance. But the real turning point came a century later in France, when bakers began using it in pastries. So while many things can be debated, vanilla's major benefit, other than its lovely flavor, is its effect on the mood. Such a lovely and calming scent which is known to impart feelings of peace, comfort, and most importantly, contentment. But here's where we are about to tell you a secret. The world's most luxurious vanilla comes from a volcanic island in the Indian Ocean. The story begins on Reunion Island, where lush green forests span the island and are enriched with the surrounding volcanic soil. A quaint and unique island that has housed hundreds of years of vanilla history, an undoubted pioneer in its creation. However, there was a major twist in this story, especially for our Reunion Island. The only bee that could pollinate the vanilla flowers lived off continents away in Mexico, leaving the growers with no alternative. There wasn't a single species that could help with this, and the planters realized they were out of luck, at least until a smart little youth came by with a shocking discovery. Edmund was a 12-year-old slave boy with a passion for botany. The difficulty in cultivating vanilla was so obvious that there was another professor called Charles Morn from Belgium who had published a long, winding way of hand pollination, but his technique was in no way, shape, or scale fit for mass production. This is where Edmund's discovery came along. He realized that if the thin membrane separating the male and female parts of the plant was pried open with a simple blade of grass, they could simply smear the pollen from the male part, called the stigma, by thumb onto the female part of the plant known as the anther. This method was simple and extremely effective at achieving results, quite frankly leaps ahead of any other methods. It really didn't take long for people to notice, and the technique spread like wildfire because of its profitability. Most importantly, though, it broke the barrier of being unable to grow vanilla outside of Mexico. The boy had single-handedly kick-started the production of the best vanilla in the world. In fact, Reunion became the world's largest supplier of vanilla for a period of time. Soon, the French colonists carried the technique over to Madagascar to cultivate more vanilla, leading to the renowned Madagascar currently reigning the world as the top exporter of vanilla. This method is still followed by Reunion Island to this day. In fact, almost all vanilla worldwide is hand-pollinated. It's really no wonder why these things aren't cheap. But did you know that the name frozen vanilla isn't actually related to the spice being frozen at all? In fact, you'd be surprised to learn that it's actually a much different reason that we will uncover later. But here's a tidbit until then. Frozen vanilla is not a different plant from the usual vanilla, it's the same. The name's origins are French, where it's called vanille givrée, which directly translates to the frozen or frosted vanilla we know. Well, it also turns out that the adored vanilla is, quite frankly, one of the trickiest plants to deal with. You'd be shocked to know that its flower only blooms for 2 to 3 hours when it's time for harvest. This window is so small that every time this happens, the handlers rush to pollinate the flower before it fatefully closes. But there's a catch. These are also gentle flowers, and any rough housing will ruin the chances of a vanilla pod coming into existence. Though this isn't the end of the effort that goes into preparing the delectable vanilla you've come to use in your kitchen. After the careful and manual pollination, the pods take their sweet time to reach maturity. The average is about 9 months and is highly dependent on the climate of the region. But to stop any confusion during this time, there are distinct methods and markers to differentiate between the maturity of these pods. A yellowing tip signals the early start of these pods, while the later development of a brown tip, or even a slight split at the tip, signals that the pod has reached its peak aromatic potential. Kinda hard to miss. However, the great part about this controlled cultivation is that the pods can be picked at the right moment, especially since it's not like they all ripen at the same time. Yes, this is why workers return to the same vines to pick the late bloomers. The method for picking them is quite simple. They are clipped delicately to avoid bruising the pods. Take a lucky guess as to what the vanilla smells like at this point. You'd be shocked to know nothing, since the magic hasn't started yet. Right after harvest, beans are sorted by size and quality. Longer, plumper pods are separated from smaller ones and kept in different batches. This helps decide which beans will become the highest value gourmet vanilla. From here, the vanilla goes for a scalding swim known as blanching in hot water. This is done to kill the bean's vegetative tissue because it won't stop ripening. This process also jump-starts the enzymes in the vanilla that will later produce the prized vanillin. At this stage, your beans are filled with glucovanillin, which is the preform of the vanillin which forms during curing. This part will be important soon. Think of vanilla pods like a ticking time bomb of flavor. Hurry too much or take too long, and you might end up spoiling the final result. Well, in this process, there seems to be no such thing as too much heat. The beans now get wrapped and placed in containers to officially sweat for around 36 to 48 hours, kind of like a sauna. The moisture in this helps to trigger the much-needed fermentation and, in turn, releases chemical reactions inside the pods, giving off the first notes of the desired aroma of vanilla. Almost like a routine, these beans follow a perfect rhythm. Come daylight, and they are spread under the sun to dry slowly, and at night, they continue their sauna-like sweating. This routine helps 3 major processes to take place: enzymatic hydrolysis, where the glucovanillin becomes vanillin, followed by phenol browning, in which the deep brown and rich color native to vanilla develops. Then, finally, the most awaited, lipid oxidation, which is when the complex aroma's much-needed compounds form. After all this, these beans are moved indoors to dry slowly on racks. This phase is the longest and might even stretch out to months, allowing the pods ample time to stabilize and for the flavor to get concentrated, leading us to the much-awaited birth of the frozen vanilla. So how does this frozen effect happen? The answer is rooted in the individual vanilla plants. No 2 plants are the same. A key player in this rich outcome is vanillin we mentioned earlier. Even though all vanilla pods have this key substance, the amount largely varies. In the simplest of terms, the more vanillin there is, the more likely it is that the vanilla will be frosted as the vanillin essential oil crystallizes on the bean surface. This is usually a sign of maturity and top-tier quality, because if a pod has more vanillin, it's used less due to the amount of punch it packs. However, the distribution of vanillin in a plant largely depends on a few compounding factors. Most importantly is the species. Planifolia is a type that has the highest vanillin production, while Tahitensis tends to rank a little bit lower than our top contender. Another reason for this elite spice's creation are the growing conditions. The soil, terrain, and most importantly, the climate all play huge parts in its creation. There's also other factors like the plant's maturity. The more mature or ripe the pods are, the more vanillin grace its outer surface is shiny crystals. Honestly, it's safe to say that these poor beans travel a long road to reach greatness. The method of allowing the vanillin to develop is in the art of waiting. The bottom line, however, is clear. Only the richest pods leak vanillin, but the gentle curing and aging process will coax any of these high-promise pods to create the frosted effect Reunion Island is known for. However, the rarity is a major factor in the frozen vanilla's creation. Only the best pods develop this frosted look, and chefs worldwide fight to get their hands on it, especially since most pods never reach that threshold. Either the storage isn't conducive to crystallization. After the fated crystallization, we're glad to announce that the finished pod is created, containing about 2% of vanillin, plus a cocktail of oleoresins, sugars, gums, alcohols, aldehydes, and esters, which was a mouthful to say. These molecules blend together to create vanilla's unique profile, from fruity top notes to warm, spicy undertones, which is why no artificial vanilla can compete, because it's not just vanillin, it's a whole host of other flavors in synchronized harmony. All this leads to the sweet conclusion of careful packing. Every frozen vanilla pod is treated like treasure, which after all this effort isn't far from what it is. After grading and bundling, the beans are aged in airtight chests or vacuum sealed to preserve their supple texture and complex aroma. Finally, they get shipped off to vendors and, most importantly, to you. It's this patience and hard work that leads us from a simple flower to the final spice sitting right in your pantry, waiting for the day you will bake a cake, the gold standard of the spice world. As always, thanks for watching and see you next time at Whole Process.